5. The Aftermath of Gothic Fiction. Meanwhile, other hands had not been idle, so that, above the dreary plethora of trash like Marquise von Gross's Horrid Mysteries, 1796, Miss Roch's Children of the Abbey, 1796, Miss Dacqueray's Zafloya are the Moor, 1806, and the poet Shelley's schoolboy effusions, Zastrozzi, 1810, and Saint Irvine, 1811, both imitations of Zafloya. There arose many memorable, weird works, both in English and German, classic in merit, and markedly different from its fellows because of its foundation in the Oriental tale rather than the Walpoleesque Gothic novel. It is the celebrated history of the Caliph Vathek by the wealthy dilettante William Beckford, first written in the French language but published in an English translation before the appearance of the original. Eastern tales introduced to European literature early in the 19th century through Galland's French translation of the inexhaustibly opulent Arabian Nights have become a reigning fashion, being used both for allegory and for amusement. The sly humor, which only the Eastern mind knows, and how to mix with weirdness, had captivated a sophisticated generation, till Baghdad and Damascus names became as freely strewn through popular literature as dashing Italian and Spanish ones were soon to be. Beckford, well read in Eastern romances, caught the atmosphere with unusual receptivity, and in his fantastic volume reflected very potently the haughty luxury, sly disillusion, bland cruelty, urbane treachery, and shadowy spectral horror of the Saracen spirit. His seasoning of the ridiculous seldom mars the force of his sinister theme, and the tale marches onward with a phantasmagoric pomp in which the laughter is that of the skeletons feasting under arabesque domes. Vathek is a tale of the grandson of Caliph Harun, who, tormented by that ambition for super-terrestrial power, pleasure, and learning which animates the average Gothic villain or Byronic hero, essentially cognate types, is lured by an evil genius to seek the subterranean throne of the mighty and fabulous pre-Adamite sultans in the fiery halls of Iblis, the Islamic devil. Well, the devil according to Islam. Descriptions of Vathek's palaces and diversions, of his scheming sorceress mother, Carthis, and her witch tower, with the 50 one-eyed negresses. Oh, think of the Cali stuff, right? Of his pilgrimage to the haunted ruins of Istakar, Persepolis, and of the impish bride Nauranahar, whom he treacherously acquired on the way of Istakar's primordial towers and terraces in the burning moonlight of the waste, and of the terrible Cyclopean halls of Iblis, where lured by glittering promises, each victim is compelled to wander in anguish forever, and his right hand upon his blazingly ignited and eternally burning heart are triumphs of weird coloring, which raise the book to permanent place in English letters. No less notable. No less notable are the 3 episodes of Vathek intended for insertion in the tales as narratives of Vathek's fellow victims in Iblis's infernal halls, which remained unpublished throughout the author's lifetime and were discovered as recently as 1909 by the scholar Louis Melville, whilst collecting the material for his Life and the Letters of William Beckford. Beckford, however, lacks the essential mysticism which marks the acutest form of the weird, so that his tales have a certain knowing, Latin hardness, and clearness, preclusive of sheer panic fright. But Beckford remained alone in his devotion to the Orient. Other writers, closer to the Gothic tradition and to the European life in general, were content to follow more faithfully the lead of Walpole among the countless producers of terror literature in these times. May be mentioned the utopian economic theorist William Godwin, who followed his famous but not supernatural Caleb Williams' 1794 with the intently weird St. Leon 1799, in which the theme of the elixir of life, as developed by the imaginary secretive order of the Rosicrucians, is handled with an ingeniousness, if not with atmospheric convincingness. This element of Rosicrucianism, fostered by a wave of popular magical interest, exemplified in the vogue of the charlatan Caligstro and the publication of Francis Barrett's The Magus, 1801, a curious and compendious treatise on occult principles and ceremonies, of which a reprint was made as lately as 1896, figures in Bulwer Lytton and in as many late Gothic novels, especially that remote and enfeebled posterity which straggled far down into the 19th century and was represented by George W. M. Reynolds' Faust and the Demon, and Wagner, The Werewolf, Caleb Williams, though not supernatural, has many authentic touches of terror, and is the tale of a servant persecuted by a master whom he has found guilty of murder, and displays an invention and skill which have kept it alive in a fashion to this day. It was dramatized as The Iron Chest, and in that form was almost equally celebrated. Godwin, however, was too much the conscious teacher and prosaic man of thought to create a genuine weird masterpiece. His daughter, the wife of Shelley, was much more successful, and her inimitable Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus in 1818, is one of the horror classics of all time. Composed in competition with her husband, Lord Byron, and Dr. John William Polidori, in an effort to prove supremacy in horror making, Miss Shelley's Frankenstein was the only one of the rival narratives to be brought to an elaborate completion, and criticism has failed to prove that the best parts are due to Shelley rather than to her. The novel, somewhat tinged but scarcely marred by moral didacticism, tells of the artificial human being molded from charnel fragments by Victor Frankenstein, a young Swiss medical student. Created by its design in the mad pride of intellectuality, the monster possesses full intelligence, but owns a hideously loathsome form. It is rejected by mankind, becomes embittered, and at length begins the successive murder of all whom young Frankenstein loves best. friends, and family. It demands that Frankenstein create a wife for it, and when the student finally refuses in horror lest the world be populated with such monsters, it departs with a hideous threat to be with him on his wedding night. Upon that night, the bride is strangled, and from that time on, Frankenstein hunts down the monster, even at the wastes of the Arctic. In the end, whilst seeking shelter on the ship of the man who tells the story, Frankenstein himself is killed by the shocking object of his search and creation of his presumptuous pride. Some of the scenes in Frankenstein are unforgettable, as when the newly animate monster enters its creator's room, parts the curtains of his bed, and gazes at him in the yellow moonlight with watery eyes, if eyes they may be called. Mrs. Shelley wrote other novels, including the fairly notable Last Man, but never duplicated the success of her first effort. It has the true touch of cosmic fear, no matter how much the movement may lag in places. Mr. Polidori developed his competing idea as a long short story, The Vampire, in which we behold a suave villain of the true Gothic or Byronic type, and encounter some excellent passages of stark fright, including a terrible nocturnal experience in a shunned Grayson Wood.